In the office stood a mature young man in a business suit with a cup of tea. It was Yusun Luke, a former ally of the warrior group. The warriors themselves were in the room. They came from another world and ended up here, in the present of the 21st century. It is worth introducing them one by one. A young boy called to Luke from the bathroom. It was Leonard von Greenheim, the leader of the warrior group and the youngest of them all. Still, he had the most experience. The young man wanted to try the water from the well called the toilet. Next was Valiant Rex, the strongest of the barbarian warriors. The man had an incredible lust for girls. Sylvia is a priest who has to do everything by the book, although she didn't quite fit the image, thanks to her revealing clothes. Next to her was Myrnie, a cat lady, a master thief, and an avid gambler. Leaning against the window was an excited elf, Alicia Moon Knight, screaming in anger. She was a skilled archer and a dewdrop. She was outraged that people were staring at her. A girl in a witch's costume was fascinated by a talking digital panel on the wall. It was Luxie, the best sorceress in the kingdom. Sometimes the girl can get crazy and aggressive, so the war is over. But the question is, how long will the heroes be able to survive in the new world and withstand modern society? Jason Luke grabbed the chalice in anger. He ordered the heroes to get out of his way, somewhere in the vastness of the mountain forest. An angry man shouted for everyone to catch up with the soldiers, for they couldn't have gotten far. Every effort should be made to find them. The hasty group of soldiers ran as fast as they could. The enemy was outnumbered. This group of famous warriors had defeated the devil himself, and now they had to flee. Myrnie wondered what they had done wrong, and where they had gone wrong. The elf Alicia said that it was because someone was openly mocking the stupidity of the humans. Realizing that it was Rex, the man defended himself by saying that he had not deliberately provoked anyone, so Alicia's accusations were useless. Valian remarked to Rex that Luke had always told him not to throw accusations around. The heroes continued to run. Leonard sadly said that if Luke had been there, nothing would have changed. Sylvia sheepishly replied that Luke had always helped them avoid making stupid decisions, and now everything could be better. Hearing those words, Myrnie exhaled. She began to angrily tell the surprised Sylvia to stop talking about someone who was not there. Besides, she was tired of the priest's mumbling. The Catwoman said that Luke would not have helped them. He would have killed them and never helped them. Myrnie turned to the elf and asked if she agreed with her, calling her a stupid girl. Alicia Moonlight told her not to call her that, or she would kill her. Sylvia angrily ordered everyone to stop fighting. Suddenly, a light appeared above her head. A group of soldiers joyfully surrounded the priestess. It was a divine revelation. They had survived, and God had not abandoned them. Sylvia's eyes shone. God himself was speaking through her lips. Different patterns formed above her head. God said his children should believe him. The group was delighted. The priestess's hand pointed to the side. God told them to jump from a rock near them. Sylvia was surprised to awaken. The glow above their heads faded. Lucy seemed upset, and Myrnie asked what it meant. Alicia Moon Knight let out a frustrated breath. She realized they had to jump off Carb's rock. Valiant Rex asked Sylvia if she had been told anything else. The priestess crossed her arms and replied that there had been no further revelations. Myrnie struck the ground in anger. She felt that this was the same as going to certain death. The women were worried. Leonard said we had to leave. Everyone looked at him. After a moment, the whole group indignantly told Leonard that he had gone crazy. The man denied it and said that was why he had offered it to them. He offered to look at it from the other side. Die now after listening to the goddess, or be captured and die of torment. The group still stared at him. Leonard stamped his foot on the ground. He said that if they were caught, they would not die easily. The man would rather die here than in agony. He turned confidently toward the cliff. Myrnie agreed, because the only thing left for them to do was to die. Alicia thought they were mad. Everyone followed Leonard. Sylvia put her hand to her breast. She made a fist and smiled. Leonard and Valiant talked happily about something. It had really been 3 years since they had all been together again. The entire unit stood on the slope in front of the abyss. The starry night sky hung over them. The ground cracked under someone's boot. Leonard was terrified. Myrnie, almost crying, suggested that if they died, they should not meet in the next life. Sylvia agreed. Valian said he didn't want to meet the same fate. Lucy also agreed. Leonard said to jump. His foot slipped off the cliff. Everyone fell in fear. Just like that, the group of warriors who had saved the world fell into the abyss. It was getting light outside. A horse's hoof stopped at the edge of the cliff. The armored rider was surprised that they had died for nothing, although it was probably the best decision for them, since they had nowhere to go back. The man called for a platoon to be sent out to investigate. At least they had to find their bodies. The army of riders obeyed. The trees hung over the ground. Myrni opened her eyes. She had no idea where she was. Around her lay the rest of the troop, who had also regained consciousness. Myrni thought they were dead, and Alicia did not understand what had happened. Suddenly, the elf looked at something in surprise. It was sitting right on Valian's face. He thought it was Valhalla, and did not understand what it smelled like. Leonard understood nothing. Behind him, an angry Alicia said she didn't smell anything. Suddenly Leonard looked at something. He saw the silhouette of someone in the bushes. Everyone became alert. The man in the suit straightened his tie. He turned back to the group. He was very impressed. Everyone was happy because they realized it was Luke. Leonard reached out to him. He happily said that he knew the goddess would help them. He thanked her. Leonard turned to Luke with joy. He was happy because they had not seen each other in a long time. Suddenly, something touched his cheek with great speed. Luke slapped him hard. Leonard screamed in pain and his nose was bleeding. Nobody understood what was happening. Luke asked if it was funny and kicked Leonard. Leonard laughed. Everyone asked Luke what was wrong. In a touching reunion after a long time, Luke laughed. He looked at the group with crazy eyes, held out his hand, called them fucking animals that should be dismembered. Luke, no, Yuson. He desperately needed a cigarette. His mother asked him if he had eaten. Yuson answered that he had. The car drove through the city. The man asked his mother to eat more and take care of her health. The wife called him too smart. She asked the man to come home next New Year. The man had an earpiece in his ear. The man smiled. He replied that if anyone heard them talking, they would think he had never come home. The man held the wheel firmly. He said that he came home every month. The car pulled into the parking lot. The man said he understood. He told his mother he had to go and hung up. The door opened and Yuson got out. The man walked up the stairs. He pushed the button and entered the home. The robotic smart home informed the man that he had arrived. Yuson, taking off his shoes, replied that he was back. From the wall screen, a voice asked if he wanted to hear today's news about foreign stocks or domestic stocks. Aram spoke to Yuson. An artificial intelligence program that had been acquired in an unknown distribution several years ago. The man took a step forward. Originally, Aram was created to protect state-level workers, but a serious miscalculation was discovered, and an acquaintance secretly took it away. Now, he is Yuson's AI secretary. Aram addressed Mr. Yuson. A satisfied digital face appeared on the screen and said that today she had planted a virus in a voice phishing scam. Aram asked him to praise it, so Yuson let the artificial intelligence act on its own. Yuson exhaled, straightened his tie, and told it to touch only small scammers. After all, this is not a first-class demon, but a crook. Yuson looked away. 10 years had passed after the return from Midgard. The man stood in the middle of the large living room. Jason's foot touched the sandy floor. 10 years ago, when he was 17 years old, a sturdy metal cane hung in the air. He stepped into another world, Midgard. Yuson's neck was bound with an iron collar, with thick chains on both sides. He approached a gate where a burly man was waiting for him. As soon as Yuson opened his eyes, he found himself in a slave market in the middle of the desert. The man grabbed his shirt. A stick with a red-hot ring approached him. Fear froze in the boy's eyes. The ring touched his back, and Yuson bent forward with tears in his eyes. He was immediately sold into gladiator slavery because he was young and unharmed. He lay behind bars in nothing but his pants, with a burn on his back. He hoped to gain powers in the other world. A bowl of food flew to the boy. He had neither abilities nor connections. Yuson shoved the food into his mouth with his hands and cried. He had to live worse than a pet. During the day, they hunted for his life. Frightened, Yuson stood with a sword in his hands, blood splattering around him. At night, he felt in danger. Many hands reached out to the frightened man, asking him to show them his back. After all, he had risked his life to survive. His hand clutched his sword. Jason shouted angrily into the crowd that they would not be slaves. Hundreds of men supported him. Just like in the movies, he staged a rebellion and escaped. After that, Jason spent 2 years on the run in the desert. With his face covered, he spent 3 years in the city as a mercenary. One day, something caught his attention. After collecting a certain amount of money and having a small surplus, he began to look for a way to return to the original world. The men looked carefully at the bulletin board. It was a call for a warrior unit. If the devil was defeated, the goddess would grant wishes. Jason smiled. He had found him. The boy held a map in his hand. After applying for the warrior unit, he passed the exam with 5,001 odds, which reminded him of getting a job in a big company. Nevertheless, he became a member of the warrior squad, and he was a fan. Murney looked at him with fascination. Jason looked at the map and did not know if his skills in reading, writing, and accounting would be useful. In this world, 90% of the population was illiterate. Anyway, he joined the warrior unit as a porter for another 5 years. The blood rushed up. The group stood on the split ground in front of the body of a humanoid creature. They had managed to kill the devil. Everyone was happy. Jason watched from above. To return home, he put all his soul into collecting as many achievements as possible. But Jason had a cigarette in his mouth. What a bastard he really was. And all because of those stupid creatures who called themselves warriors. When she caught the devil, he was 27 years old. Yusun exhaled. The cigarette butt fell to the ground in a pile of other cigarette butts. He clenched another cigarette between his teeth. A small trickle of smoke could be seen from behind his huge backpack. He still had the hair loss, the wrinkles, and the problems. Yusun said calmly that they were finally finished, and so he made a wish to the goddess. She found out that Yusun was not from this world. A huge statue with wings smiled at the man and promised to fulfill his wish. Jason's happiness was beyond measure. Feathers and light flew around. And the goddess hoped that he would enjoy the reward for his selflessness. Jason changed. He returned to reality, to the age of 17. The moment when he went to another world, Jason was happy. Realizing that money and power are justice in this hellish world, he became a debt collector after graduating from high school, after which he increased his fortune on investments and cryptocurrency. Later, he headed a bankrupt gaming company, and even created a game based on the Midgard world. Yusun sat at his computer and was proud of his work. He said that a person who wants to forget about it does something like this. Aram asked if he was talking about his experience in lucid dreaming now. The man angrily replied that it was not a dream, but reality. Aram replied that she was worried about his mental health. Yusun replied in frustration that his mental state was because of the damned warriors. Yusun didn't want to talk about it because he had a daily quest to complete. A message appeared on the screen saying that Yusun had died. The man blamed the other players in the chat, and they mocked him. Yusun irritatedly called them trolls. He had been playing for 3 hours. Aram was concerned about his health. The man took a glass of iced tea and decided to calm down because the most important thing is an unbreakable character. He was sure it was normal to be in this state. The screen showed a huge statue of a goddess and a search for a squad. Yusun did not want to run into trolls. He drank some tea as a new squad was found. Suddenly, someone spoke to him. The man was surprised because there was no voice function. The voice asked if he remembered him. Yusun put the tea down and was surprised that the other director had done such a good job and added the update. The statue of the goddess looked at him and said it was unfortunate. No matter how much time passed, he could not forget her. Yusun asked the mother of all fights if it was really her. The goddess only wanted to say that she knew he would not forget her, when suddenly, the man punched the computer screen. Aram wondered if it was real. The voice of the goddess was still coming from the broken screen, asking what that sound was. Yusun exhaled in embarrassment and replied that it was nothing special. The man told the mother of war that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. The goddess replied that it was not her middle name, and he could just call her Io, and that it was just between the two of them. The man indignantly asked if they had such a relationship. The screen was smoking. Io said that she was not welcome here. Yuson honestly replied that he was, because her voice alone reminded him of the shitty days when he was struggling to get out of that place. Io said it was all her fault. The warriors were happy. But this problem arose because Io could not take care of her children. She asked them to hate her instead of hating Midgard. Yuson seemed furious. He asked what was happening in the other world. Io was glad that he would listen to her. The man said they would just talk. Io said that before they got into the story, she would ask him for help. Yuson was surprised. He did not understand how he could help. Io asked him to go to the nearest mountain. She was not asking for free help. She promised to give him an elixir and sap from the world tree. Yuson was overwhelmed. But first he had to go to the mountain. Jason stood in the middle of the forest. He was laughing. The man realized what was happening. He was facing a group of warriors. An elixir is a miraculous medicine that can not only heal the soul, but also increase the life expectancy. The sap of the world tree is an elixir that heals even disabilities. And the reason she offers these treasures is that it is supposed to help these scum. Yuson called them vermin who should be dismembered. Myrni asked in fright what Valian was doing. The barbarian instantly rushed to Jason, swinging at him. He was furious. Valian's foot hit the ground hard. Jason thought that if he didn't strike first, he would die. The barbarian hit the man in the chest. Jason did not move. He touched the barbarian's hand and asked if there was another way to do it. Valian was angry. Jason punched him in the chest and knocked him to the ground. He angrily told the warrior that if he did not have magical powers, he would have mixed him with mud. Valian was furious and wanted to say something. Jason hit him again. Suddenly, Leonard swung his sword behind him. Jason saw it instantly. He put his hand to the surprised warrior's chest. Jason asked if Leonard had ever heard of a 1-inch strike. The warrior was frightened. Jason lightly punched him in the chest. Leonard took off, grimacing in pain. The man was high in the sky. Sylvia was scared and called Jason Luke. She said it was self-defense and asked him not to come closer. Her staff shone in her hand behind her back. Yuson confidently stepped forward. He thanked her and said that he needed a stick. He took Sylvia's staff and said it would be perfect. The woman's arm twisted and she began to cry and scream in pain. Yuson turned around and said that she had had enough. Scared, Alicia begged the spirit to contact her. She did not understand why the spirit did not appear, and suddenly a shadow hovered over her. The staff flew past the frightened Myrnia. The woman instantly began to run away, while Yuson pinned Alicia to the ground with the staff. The man calmly watched her go. His hand reached for the stone. Yuson threw it toward Myrnia. The stone hit her right in the leg. The woman screamed in pain. Yuson looked at Luxie. He asked if she would defend herself. The wizard replied that she had no magic power, so she could not defeat him. The girl raised her hand and asked for mercy. Jusen smiled. He knew she was a witch and was proud to be smart. Everyone was lying on the ground, moaning in pain. Yuson stood calmly in the center. He looked at his phone and asked if Io would rebuke him. The goddess replied that she had no right to do so, but she wanted him to show kindness for once. Jason was angry. He asked if he had not shown enough kindness by not killing them. Io asked him to listen to the rest of the story. The statue of the goddess was on the phone screen. In the past, when she had sent Yuson to his world, she had given him back all the time he had lost. At least remembering this, he should have been kinder. The man thought that maybe if the goddess had reminded him of this earlier, he would have been gentler. He thought that he should be more clever in such situations. Goddess Io was pleased that Yuson had listened to her. She had no doubt about it. The hero took out his bag and assured the fairy Lucy that it would be enough. The bag contained a healing potion. Yuson ordered to drink this potion and to smear it on the wounds of the girls with broken legs and arms. The sorceress wondered why she had to do everything. The man replied that he had injured her the least, so she was able to do it. The girl indignantly said that she was actually injured as well. Yuson said with a sarcastic smile that he could add to it if she objected. So the girl quickly got down to business. It was getting close to dawn. When the warriors recovered a bit, they looked at Luke. The young man looked into the eyes of the heroes and asked if they wanted a second round, as it would not be difficult for him to arrange. Sylvia asked if Jason wanted to kill them. The man smiled and said that 10 years had passed, and the girl was still not far away. The characters noted that only 10 years had passed for them. Later, Yuson said that he had received an assignment from the goddess Io. The warriors found this news quite encouraging. Without hesitation, Jason Luke called them to follow him. The elf Alicia was not happy about this. If only she had magical powers, she would have tried to resist. However, Rex said that the girl was no match for him. He said that Luke has a different level of power. It doesn't even compare to what it was 3 years ago. It was he who won the battle against the head of the Devil's army 3 years ago. Even without magic, a man can defeat him and Leon at the same time. Leonard, heard his friends talking. He turned to them and said with a smile that Luke was really strong. He repeated the phrase that it doesn't even compare to what happened 3 years ago. The car was moving through the bright city. Murney the cat was fascinated by this beauty. Beautiful lights flickered everywhere. Suddenly, Luxie wanted to ask Yuson a question. The man allowed her to ask. First, the magician asked about the car. She asked if this carriage was moved by magic. Yuson answered that it was moved by a simple technology. The girl was surprised. She thought that in this case it was some special city with such special carriages. But the young man objected. He said that every family has cars. Then Luxie was asked a second question. She wondered if this was the capital of the world. But Yuson denied it again. He said it was just one of the few cities. Besides, they don't have such a thing as the capital of the world. There are many countries, and the strongest country among them can be called the center of the world. The girl asked, "So what is the current situation in the country they are in?" The man said that he didn't know about the military aspect, but the country's economy was ranked 10th among all. The man's face was still thoughtful. This surprised Luke. Indeed it did, because the girl had even more questions and was confused in her thoughts. It was a completely different world. The heroes would have to face all the laws of this world. Yuson Luke brought everyone home. When he entered the house, he was greeted by his artificial intelligence, Aram. Aram asked who all these people were. Were they his guests? Yuson said that they were not welcome. In this case, Aram decided to set the security level to 3 and change the video surveillance in the room for 24 hours. Luxie thought that Aram was Ego's weapon. She asked Luke about it, because he said that there was no magic in this world, so where did the ego weapon come from? Yuson replied that it was not an ego weapon, but simply artificial intelligence. It's like an imaginary person. However, it will be easier for the warriors if they think that the whole building is an ego weapon. The young man also warned that if any of the things in this house disappeared or broke, he would kill everyone. The heroes stared at the stern Jason. They all looked at Murney the cat, because she likes to steal things. But Murney worriedly assured them that she hadn't done anything yet. Opening a drink in an iron tin, Yuson Luke addressed the goddess. He asked if she wanted him to guarantee the lives of these warriors. Io asked a counter question and asked what the man himself thought about it. Luke said that it was not necessary to speak in riddles and hints. He knew that Sylvia and Alicia suffered from mesophobia, fear of new and unusual objects and contact with them. So he understood why they behaved this way. Yuson also didn't like the presence of crowds in the house, so he had no idea what he was signing up for. So Luke later told the heroes that the goddess Io wanted him to help them survive, or rather, to help them adapt to this new world. Yuson said that he did not know what the heroes were doing in Midgard, but in any case, they got into trouble again, because that's their style. Alicia was tense at these words. She angrily exclaimed that she was not a sinner, so let Luke watch his words. She told him not to address her as a criminal. The young man then asked the elf how she became a fugitive in such a situation. Alicia began to stutter. However, Yuson stopped her and said that he was not interested anyway, and she did not have to justify herself. Anyway, there was only one thing that Luke had to do. He would have to spend at least 1 year helping the warriors adapt to this world during that time. This means that he will teach them the structure and knowledge of this world, as well as survival skills. Alicia asked what the man was putting so much effort into teaching them. He replied that the thought of seeing their stupid faces every day made him sick. Yusun reminded him that he and the soldiers were not colleagues from the very beginning. In fact, they were worse than strangers. It would be more accurate to say that Luke and the warriors were warring allies. So Yusun told them to learn and adapt quickly so he could leave them behind. If anyone had any objections to his training methods, they would have to deal with it. Luke gave them a day to think about it. He also said that Aaron would teach them how to use the equipment. The heroes looked after the young man and were left alone with their thoughts. There was a moment of silence in the room. Aaron immediately asked if anyone was hungry. Valiant Rex immediately raised his hand, indicating his eagerness to eat. Valiant said that first of all, they needed to eat to survive. A table of modern food was set up in front of the warriors. Myrnie started to try the pizza. She was very impressed. It was delicious. Valiant remarked that trickster Luke had the best cook in the world. Myrnie looked at Alicia and asked if elves could eat meat. Alicia shut her mouth. Leonard assured her that Yusun still hated them. Myrnie pointed out that he dislikes them even more than he dislikes demons. That was true, she told herself. After all, ever since the events in the village of Fildea, they've been... Before she could speak, Sylvia interrupted her in a sharp tone. Kitty apologized. The table fell silent again. Yusun Luke had made a phone call to someone. He ordered someone to help him make 6 legal IDs. He said not to ask any more questions. He would send the photos soon. Luke added that these people looked like refugees who had entered the country illegally. The young man breathed out a sigh of relief. The goddess Io did not know that in this world so many difficult requirements must be fulfilled in order to exist. However, Yusun said not to pay attention. He was only doing it because there was a price to pay. Io said she remembered everything and promised to keep her promise. Of course, only if the man keeps his resentment in check and helps these children. Luke said that these were the most problematic characters he had ever encountered. The day came. It was already 12 o'clock. The man wondered what the soldiers were doing in the middle of the day. Io assured him that Luke would understand them, but they hadn't been able to rest for the last 3 months, and their fatigue was showing. The man asked what the goddess found so beautiful about these bastards that she continued to take their side.
Io replied that she just wanted the boyfriend to be nicer to them. Yusun Luke thought this was an unacceptable request. Suddenly, Sylvia entered the room. Jason was surprised that the same Sylvia who used to torment him and make him pray every dawn had finally woken up. In her defense, she said she was very tired. She admitted that Jason was right. After all, she had become lazy and behaved wrongly because she was following everywhere and was an apostle of the goddess. She thanked Luke for telling her the truth. The man told her to go wash and wake the others up to eat. Otherwise, one would think that the heroine had put on saliva. Sylvia was ashamed and went about her business. Later, she and the girls were in the shower. They were amazed by this device, because the water poured endlessly by itself. Isn't that magic? Luxie thought. Myrnie finally realized that the toilet was not a well to drink from. Leon, on the other hand, was amazed by the hygiene items. Soap and shampoo, toothbrush and toothpaste, and even a towel and pajamas seemed very comfortable. This world seemed very advanced to him, and fascinating. When he finished tending to the kitchen, Leon said that their new clothes would be delivered during the day. Sylvia pointed out that they already had their own clothes. However, Eunice said that if they went out in them, they would be the laughingstock of the circus. So the girl asked if the style of clothing was very different in this world. Yusun asked Aaron to demonstrate it. The screen showed a telemarketer selling winter clothes. Then Yusun showed the models in underwear and said that these are normal clothes in this world and everyone should remember that. The whole squad was surprised. Sylvia said it was indecent. Leonard's nose was bleeding from anger, and only Myrnie said that it was very hot. Yusun was outraged by the editorial. In his world, girls dressed much more openly, and the usual example of underwear was considered indecent. Sylvia apologized in embarrassment for her reaction. Yusun turned away and said that in any case, Aram had found out their sizes yesterday and ordered underwear and clothes, so they should get ready. Alicia asked frightened what that meant. The elf covered her hand because she thought that Yusun had touched them at night. The man was furious. He angrily said that he would rather look at the goblin's naked body than stare at them. Then, in a calmer tone, he reminded the group that as soon as the clothes arrived, they had to get ready quickly, because they had to go to the lawyer's office to get an ID. Leonard asked in surprise if they couldn't just go to the guild and get them made. Yusun replied that it was not that easy. The man irritatedly imagined the squad as little chickens and wondered how the kindergarten teachers must suffer. The squad was in the lawyer's office. Myrnia said that her breasts were comfortable in the new clothes, but Sylvia told her that it was indecent. The lawyer's words came from the office that they needed to apply for refugee status, because they could be caught as illegal immigrants and would have big problems. Yusun breathed a sigh of relief and thanked him. The lawyer reminded him that it was not free. The man promised to deposit money into a virtual account. The lawyer gladly agreed. The whole squad was waiting for Yusun in embarrassment. As soon as he left the office, Sylvia came up to him and asked him in a trembling voice if he was okay. Yusun asked if he could tell that everything was bad. The priest apologized because they had caused him to spend a lot of money. Yusun said that he would pay Io later anyway. Sylvia was frightened by what she heard, and the goddess replied that she did not have the currency of his world. The man was disappointed that they couldn't take a joke. He turned to the squad and said that if everything went well, they would get their IDs in 2 months. Now they had to go to the mall. Myrnie asked curiously what it was. Yusun answered that it was a place where everything was sold, from food to tools to clothes. They had to buy the things they needed there. Myrnia, with shining eyes, asked to buy her clothes and jewelry. Sylvia was disappointed, because she thought they had enough of what they had received. The whole squad looked at the cat sadly. Life had taught her nothing. The windows in the old houses were lit. Luke was sleeping, sprawled out on the bed. Someone was talking to him. The man opened his sleepy eyes. He got up, yawned, and asked what was wrong. There were 3 knights standing in front of him. The main knight said that one of his soldiers had stolen the Margrave's safe and he had to follow them right away. The knight pulled Luke's shirt. The man nervously told him to wait. There were gold coins and cards on the table. Luke realized it was Myrna's handiwork, and he called her a crazy bitch. That was the windy character of the heroine. Yusun stood in front of Myrnie and asked her what to buy. She happily asked for clothes and jewelry. The man said that everything was clear with clothes and asked why she needed jewelry. Myrnie replied with enthusiasm that she wanted to see how beautiful jewelry is in this world. With shining eyes, she said that if this world is so developed, then jewelry craftsmanship is also beautiful. There must be a huge number of beautiful things here. Myrnie was waiting for an answer. She looked at Jason with pleading eyes. The man was irritated, thinking that with such a cat-like temperament, one would think she was from the Meow family. Yusun turned to Myrnia. He immediately warned her that public order in this world is on a completely different level than in Midgard. Even if a master thief comes here, they will be caught with a 98% probability. Yusun explained that if she doesn't watch her hands, she will be caught, and the moment this happens, all ties between them will disappear. But if he had his way, it would be better if she stole something. Myrnie was embarrassedly silent. Yusun looked at her angrily. The woman explained that she just wanted to see how the handicraft had developed and that he shouldn't worry so much. Moreover, she promised to remember Yusun's advice. The man turned away and said it was great. He smiled evilly and thought that this stupid habit would not go away and that there would be one less freeloader. Myrnie was carrying packages and humming something. She smiled at Yusun and thanked him for the clothes. The man looked at her silently. Myrnie asked him what was wrong. Yusun replied that everything was fine. He could not believe it. He looked at the woman and thought that this thieving girl hadn't stolen anything. He did not believe that Myrnie had gotten wise. The woman calmly put the packages in the car. If it wasn't for her almighty skill and fighting ability, Myrnie would have been kicked out of the warrior squad long ago. The woman was irritated and told someone to move. But now if she sees some juicy prey, she just passes by. It was hard for Yusun to believe it. The man got into the car. He looked through the mirror at Myrnia. She was happy. The man did not understand what the trick was. The car moved off. At home, Aram welcomed Mr. Eason home. Myrnie walked quietly by. The man asked to scan the soldier's body parts for precious metals. A moment later, Aram reported that nothing was found. Yusun was surprised. Aram replied that he had scanned them all and they were clean. Jason thought about it. Suddenly he smiled, because he realized what he had done. Aram did not understand anything. The man happily asked if Myrna really had a head injury. The woman was smiling. She was spinning around in her new outfit. It was much more refined than the one she wore in Midgard, and even the trim was elegant. And the price was 1,000 of the price of a suit worn by aristocrats. Myrnie looked at herself in the mirror in awe. She asked if Yusun could buy her more clothes like this. The woman looked at her snow-white socks. No one answered her, and she realized that he could not. The light was on in Jason's room. Myrnie came into his room in her pajamas because he had called her. Yusun closed his book. Myrnie had to know at least one reason why he was calling her. She sat down in the chair. She knew that Yusun was wondering why she hadn't stolen anything. The man answered that it was true. He had two assumptions. The first was that Myrnie had finally gone mad. The second was that she had a terminal illness. Myrnie threw up her hands and said that both assumptions were wrong. She believed that Yusun was crossing the line with her. The man stood up abruptly and began to shout that even at night, when he thought about her in the past, he woke up in a cold sweat. During the war, she gambled, stealing the capital of the detachment, and then secretly entered the Lord's castle. Myrnie smiled and said, somewhat embarrassed, that it really happened. Yusun was horrified to remember how Myrnie had apologized to him for her mistake without any remorse. The man told Myrnie that he would rather believe that Valian had given up women than that she would stop stealing. Yusun offered her a deal, to leave now, and to contact him in case of any trouble. Yusun promised to rent a hotel room for the woman and give her enough money. In his opinion, it was a welcome offer for a vagabond like her. Myrnie lowered her head in sadness. Tears streamed down her cheeks. The woman had promised to keep her promise, so she only asked for one thing. With tearful eyes, Myrnie looked at Yusun and begged him not to kick her out. The man was embarrassed. He did not understand what was happening to this girl. Myrnie was beaming with happiness. The war was over, and her wish was more money, more gold. The woman was lying in a huge pile of jewelry. Overnight, she became the richest person in the kingdom and threw parties every day. She went to the casino and money flowed out of her hands like water. She would cry when she lost. Even so, the mountain of gold could not be reduced. Myrnie was looking at something in horror. In any case, she believed in it. But one day all her gold disappeared. She jumped back to the gambling table, spending even the money she had borrowed. But her debt only grew. And finally, her old habit reminded her of herself. Myrnie touched the royal family's fortune. Just like that, Myrnie turned from a hero to a villain, wearing a long black cloak covering her face. She fled the city. The place she went to after escaping was her native village. The woman was standing on the edge of the forest. There was horror in her eyes. All the inhabitants were dead, and the village was in flames. Myrnie fell to her knees and thought that it was all because of her. Someone had spoken to her because she had caused trouble again. Myrnie thought it was Luke speaking to her. The voice said that he was free and would no longer follow her. But the sin she had committed would come back to haunt her, and with such force that she would not be able to cope on her own. Myrnie looked at her hand. The voice told her to be reasonable at last. Her fingers began to tremble. Myrnie cried out in terror. The fire rose high into the sky. Yusun listened to her in confusion. He realized that Myrnie's hands were trembling. The woman was crying. This happened when she approached the casino. Everything around her began to spin and she felt nauseous. Yusun realized it was PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. He irritably told Myrna that she could leave and he would postpone his offer to move in for now. She thanked him in a trembling voice. Yusun thought that no matter how much Myrnie had stolen from the royal family, his finger nervously tapped the arm of his chair. They were trying to kill not only the members of the warrior order, but also her tribe. It was obvious. Yusun knew that this was a ploy to reduce the authority of the warrior order and increase the power of the royal family. Using Myrna's actions as an excuse, the huge man with the crown was taking a bite of the steak. Nerba is a tyrant and envious king of kingdoms, one who strives to be always in first place. Io's voice came from the phone, saying that she did not doubt Yusun's intelligence. The man asked why she hadn't stopped this talentless child. If Io had said so, Myrnie would have obeyed. The goddess explained that only a few people know this fact, but after she grants a wish, her power to influence the lower world weakens for about 10 years. Io stood there with her fists clenched. She also wanted to refuse Myrna. Io cried and did not understand how she could commit such a sin just because of her personal desire. Nerba is a sinner, along with his minions. In the future, even in hell, he will suffer from endless pain in the most ruthless and terrible place. Yusun looked at the phone screen in silence. He said that no matter how hard you try, you can't console the grievances of those people who were sacrificed. Io replied that she had already sent the souls of the deceased people from the Myrnie tribe to the land of peace. Yusun asked Io indignantly if she knew that Myrnie had done this because of the king's greed. The goddess replied that she did, but Myrnie was sleeping soundly. By her crime, she gave the king an excuse, and in the end she lost her tribe. That is why she could not forgive herself. Now Yusun understood why the goddess was so favorable to them. He said that Io was very kind, but so naive. The morning came. Erin was nervously telling Mr. Yusun that Leonard had broken the doorknob. Sylvia had a seizure while watching TV. Erin didn't know what to do. Valian? Lucy? Alicia? Yusun held his head with both hands. He did not understand why there was not a single normal person among them. Myrni was spinning in front of the mirror. She was probably doing a fashion show right now. Yusun turned to Aram in despair. He leaned back and asked how to teach people the rules of life in Korea if they were from other countries and were very different in culture and common sense. Aram thought about it. He asked if Yusun had to do this. The man did not understand. Aram answered that there are educational programs for such foreign migrants. A class would be held in a week and they should be sent there. Yusun got up and turned to Aram again. The man smiled and said that he was a genius. Aram was glad that Yusun finally realized that. The whole group was sitting at their desks. The woman said she was glad to see everyone, introduced herself as Yoon Hayoung and said she would be their teacher. She smiled, hoping that they would become friends. Yoon Hayoung begged Yusun. She said on the phone that she couldn't take it anymore. The woman apologized again and hung up. The entire squad was kneeling with their hands up. Yusun asked what they had done to make the teacher cry. The man suggested starting with Myrna. The woman was surprised. She said with satisfaction that she had been listening attentively to the lecture, and the problem had arisen because of Leon, the brainless duck and the elf. Alicia said irritably that it was a setup, but Myrni denied it. Yusun looked at the three embarrassed culprits in annoyance. He gave them 3 seconds to tell the truth. Leon wondered about democracy, a country of the people, created by the people for the people. He asked if this was really normal and if it would be better to do the opposite. Yoon Hayoung thought about it. Leonard went on to say that those in power can inherit their power in one way or another. He was surprised that people didn't know that. The teacher embarrassedly suggested taking the United States as an example. Leon replied that the United States is a country ruled by money. People with powerful financial power control the government and society and deploy their troops, saying that it is for the sake of world peace. Leon considered this a complete dictatorship. Yoon Hayoung appealed to the judge because she had not said a word to Leon. Valian interrupted the conversation. He said that the police were in the same condition as the guards. Valian asked if there was a problem in choosing such people if there was a difference between men and women. Yoon Hayoung replied that it was for the sake of gender equality. Valian replied irritably that he wasn't asking about equality. He was wondering why they weren't increasing their combat power. He had heard about the gun and knew that it was a weapon that should not be used carelessly. Valian didn't understand the point of a police force that had no weapons and no fighting power. Yoon Hayoung put her hands over her ears and said again that she hadn't even said anything to him. Then Alicia intervened, talking about racial democracy. No one gave her an answer to the question of why people with different skin color but the same species are discriminated against and bullied. She heard that even in Korea, people with black and white skin color are looked down upon. Alicia wanted the teacher to confirm that this was not the case here. Yoon Hayoung hysterically called for the judge. Yusun hit Alicia in anger. In his opinion, she was guilty because she was a racist and spoke about racial discrimination. The woman lay on the floor, and Yusun looked at the men. The week of happiness was over. Io thought. She asked if the children had made a mistake. Yusun said that even though Alicia had said so, the others had asked the right questions. It was the teacher's fault that she couldn't answer in a decent way. A real teacher should have answered the most provocative questions fairly and impartially. If he could not answer, he lost his qualifications. Yusun realized that he had to teach them himself. Io was surprised, but still, the goddess smiled. Even though 10 years had passed, Yusun was irritatedly showing something in the book to Valian. He still had the unchanged heart of a hero. Leon came up behind him. He had a question for Jason. The young man was surprised that Leon was so inquisitive. He said that in their world, the Fifth Kingdom is regressing more and more. Over time, this has become more and more noticeable. But in their modern world, it's the opposite. Only progress is visible. So Leonardo wondered why it was the other way around. Jusun replied that these are very obvious things, and Leon should have known about it, but the man said that it was not obvious to him. Luke replied that there is only one difference between Midgard and Korea, namely, whether the people pay attention to the government. Leon was surprised. Luke went on to explain that Midgard rejects and hates everything new and shared. Those who think only of themselves will eventually rot slowly. And here, on the contrary, as long as society keeps an eye on everything, one person will never monopolize everything. The main message of the society is that they can only guarantee power and wealth if they are distributed fairly among people. If there was no goddess, the kingdom might not survive. Sylvia misunderstood these words and thought that the goddess was the reason why the world was making mistakes. Jason said that was not what he meant. After all, the goddess fulfills her duties. Sylvia tensed up. Luke began to say that it was the fault of their temple. Suddenly Sylvia had a seizure and started saying incomprehensible things. She said that the church pretended to be good, but in reality it was misinterpreting its dogmas. Luke said the lesson was over. When he left the room, Luke said that the characters surprised him. After all, the girls have changed. The one who used to twist her mace in different directions is now calm, and the abnormal elf is quiet, but she cannot adapt. The goddess asked what the man's thoughts were about the warriors in the first place. The man said he thought they were idiots, worse than animals. He noticed that the heroes had indeed changed, but they were still idiots. The goddess said that was a rather low estimate. Night. Fragile, careful hands were flipping through a book. It was Luck's eyes. She was enthusiastically rereading a book. Suddenly, Luke came over and grabbed the girl by the rock. He said that she had been in his room for a very long time. He asked when she would leave his room, but Luck's eye said that she would only leave when she finished reading. The man had no intention of waiting. He said that he would kick her ass if she didn't leave the room. The sorceress responded by saying that Luke was a real bore. The man was about to hit the girl, but Lucy left. Luke was surprised. The little sorceress was lying in her bed. Other girls were sleeping next to her. Each of them had a dream. Alicia dreamt that she was being bullied, and Sylvia apologized to the goddess, who said that she was a sinner. And Myrna, oddly enough, dreamt of beautiful clothes. Luxie wanted to finish the book. In the other room, Luke was saying that Midgard hated everything new and shared, that those who cared only about themselves would eventually rot slowly. Luxie thought these words made sense. After all, no one had ever written anything down. They only passed on something inherited, but they did not pass on knowledge. The girl raised her hand and said that her wishes could come true here. The wizard came back to Luke's room. There was a sign on the door prohibiting entry, especially for Lucy, so the girl went to look for Luke. She met him in the wardrobe. The man said that he could not open the room for her. The girl asked why, and Yuzen replied that the sorceress had a disease that penetrated her. As soon as the girl gains knowledge, she wakes up with a psychosis that will not leave her alone until she finds all the answers. Luxie denied it. She said she was not sick, but her husband said that she was mentally ill. Once upon a time, under the conviction that she needed to find a cure, she had anatomized more than 100 people, just to satisfy her thirst for knowledge. But the girl said that all the people voluntarily agreed to be treated. Luke reminded her that this was not true at all, and that people only agreed because of their threats. Lucy pointed out that these were necessary sacrifices. The man was confused that she said victims to the people. It confirmed their mental illness. Luke approached the sorceress. He said that she should have felt at least a sense of conscience after killing these people, or what she called treatment. He recalled what Lucy had said at that moment. When Luke found the girl in treatment, she was initially alarmed. Luke was taken aback by what he saw. Lucy replied that everything went well and was more than effective. The man said that at that moment his hair stood on end. Most likely, even now the girl is not too worried about it. After all, hundreds or thousands of people will die for their knowledge. Lucy said that Luke had misunderstood everything. She said that it was all about saving the city, not about the girl's interest. Yuzen said that if it had happened once or twice, it could have been considered a mistake, but it happened more than once for Luke, so it was premeditated. Luke told her to stop making excuses, because he didn't trust her anyway. He wouldn't even be surprised if she killed tens of thousands of people for the sake of the experiment. So the man sent the girl away to keep her hands off his business. But Lucy said she didn't want to go. She said she would never leave. Luke was surprised at her stubbornness. In a moment he ordered the girl to leave him as loudly as possible. Jason was tired. He did not know what to do. The goddess Io told him not to fight so much, otherwise his blood pressure would rise. Yusen was angry, because it was as if she was forbidding him to read his thoughts. Io said that she hadn't read his mind, but it was obvious from his behavior. He thought about turning off the game, and thus the goddess, because it was disturbing his thoughts. However, Io pointed out that if he did that, the journey between Midgard and Earth would take a very long time. Luke thought that this was not a problem, but the goddess said that the download would take more than a year. Yuzen immediately realized the scale, but didn't turn off the game, but he still couldn't keep his phone on all the time. He didn't know what to do about it. Io said that the reason she could be connected to their world is that in the virtual space of the game, her imitators worship her, all for the sake of some kind of team building. However, in this world there are no believers, so it cannot arise in the flesh. Luke realized how confusing everything was, but Jo said that her husband had made her life much easier. He was thinking of ways to make the goddess appear in the flesh. Jason called Sylvia. He told her to see what she could do about it. The girl recognized her own world, but she asked where the holy power came from, to which Luke had no answer. He said to pay attention to the players who play the role of the hosts. He asked if there was any way to do something, but the girl said that if Luke was so superior to them, he could do it himself. So why ask for help? Luke said that even though Sylvia was crazy, she was still holy, so she knew better. He said that she wouldn't need Io's help in the future. He asked why she was trying if she was going to lose. Sylvia thought she had to keep going until the end. She said that it was unlikely to do anything, because players believe in God only in the virtual world. Therefore, it will not affect reality, but you can put sacred power into an object. Luke asked if Sylvia had a cross, but the girl said that she had sold most of them when she ran away. So now she was guilty before Luke, and she was ready to be punished. But suddenly she had an idea. She asked her husband about idolatry, what it was and how it worked. Luke thought that Sylvia was completely crazy. Someone was sadly saying goodbye to his toy named Artemis-chan. If not for a family emergency, she would have stayed. Luke was in a hurry, so he told him to give him the doll as soon as possible. But the young man with glasses said he needed time to say goodbye to the toy. Luke didn't like that very much. Time passed. Yuzun brought the toy home to Sylvia. He asked if she could feel anything now. Indeed, she felt more holy energy from the doll. It seems that the previous owner of the toy was a true believer. Idolatry. As a common example, we can look at ordinary idol worshippers. In Midgard, the authority of the goddess cannot be neglected. Therefore, if someone dared to worship another god, it was perceived as cutting off from their god. Such people were gathered in the temple and severely punished. Luke asked why they were oppressed so much. Sylvia said that it was to steal for divine power from people who believed in different gods. All the stolen divine power was used to keep the bishops young, to keep their dirty lives. The girl herself also did not know about this until she became a high priestess. Perhaps she too will go to hell and burn in the eternal flames of horror. Luke said, so it turns out that those who claim to be ordinary priests were actually crazy bastards who took power from other believers. Sylvia shouldn't have said anything about it. She wiped the sweat from her forehead. The man asked her how much time was left. Sylvia said that, according to the numbers, it was about 3%. There was a doll on the table, a vessel for the goddess Io. It would be nice if she had a human incarnation. So Luke thought of a figurine. He used to take action figures from fans of the game who agreed to give them away. The dolls were endowed with a real belief in the goddess, so it was quite a generous act on the part of the fans. Io assured them that even if everything didn't go perfectly, they would still get a quality connection with her. So the heroes went ahead and tried. Io's energy began to flow into the doll, which was already endowed with people's faith. The heroes were waiting for a miracle. Luke and Sylvia were sweating from the anticipation. They thought everything was lost, but the divine power began to work. All the soldiers came out of their rooms to observe the phenomenon. They were shocked. The doll really began to come to life. Sylvia was delighted, but the other soldiers were scared. It was the first time they had seen something like this with their own eyes. Luke said it was like a gathering of fans. The goddess Io herself could not believe that everything would be successful. She could not have imagined that the players' prayers for their dolls would be so strong. Her husband thought it was a bad thing. After all, it was very strange. The doll came to life and started moving on its own. Joe smiled. Luke asked if there was any other way to transform, because it really looked scary and strange. Io rolled her eyes. She was embarrassed to say it, but since she had already descended from heaven, she would not be able to get out of this body for at least 20 years. Luke's eyes were filled with confusion. Io immediately began to apologize. Yuzun Luke seemed to be furious, but Sylvia stopped him. She asked him to calm down. She also promised that she would try to work on Io's rebirth. Luke was surprised that Sylvia stood up for the goddess. Luke turned to the girl. Sylvia was tense in anticipation. She realized that the man was very strong. Yuzun Luke said that the fact that they had been living peacefully in recent days did not mean that their relationship had gotten better. He told her not to pretend that things were getting better and that she was repenting to him. She was still a rotten Sue *ka. He threw her hand away. The girl confirmed that they had a bad relationship, and she still hasn't even apologized. But still, it hurts their hearts. Luke walked out. Io followed him. He said that she was supposed to comfort her daughter, but for some reason she followed him. The goddess said that Sylvia would get over it. Io noticed that Luke looked rather sad. The man ignored her? She was worried that Luke would hurt himself. Yuzun already regretted making her a doll. A little later, Luke was in the gym. He was lifting weights. Valley and Rex came to see him. Luke asked what Rex wanted. Valian said that he had asked Aram and he told him that the man was here. Valian wanted to go outside for a while. Valian wanted to go outside, because it was very difficult to stay inside all the time. A sweaty Yuzun looked at him. Valian replied embarrassedly that he would stay at home if he couldn't. Yuzun thought everything would be fine. He said that he would give him a watch and that he should not stray far from home. Valian did not believe him. Yusun replied that as soon as they finished their business, the squad would leave. He was not their babysitter. Valian thanked him. Outraged, little Io looked at Yusun. The goddess said it was unexpected. The man jumped in fright. Io thought he would not let Valian leave. Yusun replied that they would have to live in this world anyway, so they had better adapt, and the best way to do that was to learn from their own experience. Io asked if her husband now says that it is better to experience it once than to hear it explained 10 times. Myrni was amazed. She thought that Valian was already leaving them. The man did not understand what she meant, because he was just going to look around. Leon wondered if he could leave as well. Jusun opened the door. He said that if Valian and Leo got into something, he looked at them with crazy eyes. They knew what would happen. The men looked at him in embarrassment. Jason handed them 2 watches and said that Aram would help them with everything. Aram said it was like going on a date with him. Valian took the watches and did not understand why there were 2. Yusun explained that if he went alone, there would be only problems. He told Leo to go as well, and from now on they would go 2 by 2. Leonard was surprised. Yusun asked indignantly if Valian ran away. Who could stop him? Leon took out his watch. He was the only one who could stop Barbara. Yusun wished them a good walk, and in case something happened, they could just call Aram. The men followed him with their eyes. Sylvia stood behind them. Leonard turned to Valian and asked where they were going. The barbarian wanted to go to the most powerful country in the world, America. Aya was worried about the men letting the 2 of them go. Jason walked to his car in the parking lot. For some reason he was very anxious. Outraged, Sylvia said that if something happened, it was not her fault. She asked if Valian had understood that there could be no violence, attacks, or incidents, and if he was attacked, he should run. The man argued with her, but still agreed. Then Sylvia looked at Leon with a pleading look and asked him not to interfere in other people's affairs. The man was embarrassed. The woman asked him to just answer. Leon said he understood her. Irritated, Myrni threw her husband out the door, because she was tired of these preaching. Valian and Leonardo stood on the street. The barbarian thought they would not be able to leave. Leon replied that they were not children anymore. Aram said that even children are less worried, but they should listen to Sylvia's words. He had heard that they didn't listen to anyone. Adults like that caused more problems and worries. Leon asked if Aram was overstepping his bounds. Valian asked if he was obedient. Alicia asked if they were serious about this. She exhaled and sympathized with Sylvia. Leon wanted to say that it was not for Alicia to judge. Suddenly, the men realized that she was with them, but they didn't understand how it happened. The woman said it was just a skillful spy. Leon said, embarrassed, that Alicia was doing it to tell Luke. The woman said irritably that Luke had allowed them to see the world today. Leon thought that was an excuse. Valian told him to calm down, because Alicia was one of the best warriors and it was unlikely that she had followed them with any intent. The woman smiled and said that for a stupid barbarian, he was saying smart things. Valian said that there were only problems with her character. The woman was very angry. Suddenly Leon noticed something. He saw an old lady. A car was rushing right at her. The man behind the wheel saw her too late. He hit the brakes screaming. The old lady was scared. Something rushed past. A hand touched Grandma's shoulder. Leonard quickly carried her in his arms. Grandma was crying. She called Leon a foreign bachelor and thanked him sincerely. The man did not understand what a bachelor was. The surprised crowd looked at them. Someone asked to report to 119. Valian and Alicia stood among the astonished crowd. Their grandmother was kneeling and saying that if he hadn't shown up, she would have been in trouble. The woman was crying and giving Leon money as a reward. The man was embarrassed to say that he did not need a fee. He looked embarrassed at the crowd. Valian and Alicia were not there. Leon called out to them and begged for help. The woman covered her face and the man tried to ignore her. Aram wondered if they could get back safely. The blue sky hung over the skyscrapers. Someone was talking to Leon. Valian reminded him that Sylvia had forbidden him to interfere in the affairs of others. Alicia said that he had more brains than Barbara's muscles and she didn't understand how he could do it in less than 10 seconds. Leon was embarrassed to say that it was a great deed that was rewarded with money. Valian said that it really worked. Alicia was outraged, because he would only have enough money for ice cream. The woman grabbed the envelope with both hands. She suggested going to the place where they sell the 31st flavor. Alicia bit into the ice cream. She said it was very tasty. Valian was indignant, because it was his 5th ice cream. The woman angrily told him to shut up, because the ice cream was not gaining weight. The barbarian replied that the ice cream didn't, but she might. Alicia tried to strangle Valian. At that time, Leon was embarrassed. He didn't understand why everyone was making a fuss. Aram answered that it was because they stood out among the others. They had a unique appearance. Alicia said with satisfaction that she knew she was beautiful. Someone asked Valian to take a picture with him. Everyone admired his muscles and the man liked it. He thought this world was beautiful. The elf was outraged that Valian had become so affectionate. It was enough for him to make a joke to get it below the belt. She wanted to turn to Leon, but suddenly she was ordering. The man was surrounded by a crowd of girls who praised his beauty and thought he was an actor or a celebrity. Leon almost cried from the praise. Alicia was outraged and thought it was unfair. After a while, they were sitting in the gazebo. Alicia asked Aram if all people in this world were so clingy. He replied that it was only because they were attractive and cool. The elf said that even though he was selfish, he still knew how to say nice things. Aram was glad to hear that. Leon looked at the woman who was talking to the artificial intelligence. He told Alicia that not all people are like that. The woman smiled and said she would answer as before. She also thought that not all people were like that. Alicia began to remember. The woman was walking in a raincoat. Something caught her attention. Not 1 out of 10. Her hand held a cane tightly. A bloodied elf chained to it was crying. Alicia was terrified. Only 1 in 1,000 was human. The woman's hands were engulfed in flames. Her eyes were filled with anger. There was an explosion. Everything was on fire. The woman stood in the middle of a burning city. She did not know how to identify a person among thousands. Valian noticed that she hadn't changed since then. Alicia irritably asked if her anger was not appropriate then. The barbarian replied irritably that it was. But then the lives of innocent people were also appropriate. Alicia asked whether the deaths of not only people who had nothing to do with the deeds, but also those who tried to save the elves, were appropriate. Some elves killed people who barely spoke to them. She wondered if that was also appropriate. Valian got up from the bench. He told Alicia that she always said she despised people. He understood that, but no matter how much time passed, she would not admit her guilt, did not even try to think about it. The barbarian looked at the woman angrily and said that she was no different from those whom she despised so much. Alicia was embarrassed and angry. She looked angrily at Valian. Her eyes filled with rage. The barbarian looked at her silently, just as they were about to start a fight. Aram spoke to them. He said that it was better to stop Leon first and then fight. Valian looked to the side in surprise. Alicia did not understand. Leonard was gone. His voice came from a distance, telling someone that they shouldn't bully the weak. Leon hit someone in the face. He was outraged that these people called themselves men. Alicia and Valian called out to him angrily. Behind Leon was a guy with glasses. He was scared and crying. Among the 10 commandments of a knight, the first are to act bravely, do good deeds, and become a fighter of good against evil. Leon was an example who always fulfilled the 3 above principles, to keep the promise he made to the woman he loved in the past. And he believed that his life was right. The 3 of them were behind bars. Leon was embarrassed to say that he had done the right thing. Valian was outraged. He said that if it was right, they would not be in jail. The world was really cruel. Alicia said indignantly that the first time they went out, they encountered the state authorities. Leon apologized. Still, he had a sense of conscience. On the phone screen, there was an image of Leon telling the boys that it was wrong to bully a person in a pack. The boys were extremely unhappy with the man's intervention. They began to climb on Leon, and he beat them back. The girl told the boys to show him how it should be done. She held the camera in her hands and asked how long she should shoot. Suddenly, the girl's face was pierced with terror. She was terrified. Alicia was scolding Leon. Valian was telling the boys that they hadn't seen them today, and the teenagers were begging them not to kill them. Suddenly, the barbarian saw the camera and reached for his phone. Someone was watching the video. The 2 men were embarrassed. One of them looked at someone. The parents of the beaten boys were outraged. The man did not understand how minors could be beaten like that. Leon was surprised by these words. Valian thought it was absurd, because if minors do this, they should be punished. Besides, they could have killed that boy. Aram explained that they don't do that in South Korea. Valian said that if a barbarian commits a crime, regardless of age, everyone will be punished. He didn't understand why people in such a developed world don't have common sense. Aram said that it was because the world was full of fools. Alicia looked at something. A woman was standing behind the bars with her arms folded. She looked at Alicia very angrily. The elf angrily asked where her eyes were looking. The woman fell convulsively to the floor. Leon asked Alicia to stop. The woman was outraged and told him not to act like a fool and just leave her alone. She said she was the person he helped. She had the power to stop it. The scared guy with glasses then said he didn't know anything. Leon explained that if Alicia had defended them then, it would have only been more difficult with that child. Better with a fist than with divine power. Leon understood, but he was offended that they were falling back on force. Aram interrupted him and said that it was not the time to think like that. Suddenly, Yusun burst into the station, angrily asking where they were. Aram said that he was very angry right now. Yusun angrily asked where the bastards were who could not earn money for food. The policeman was not happy with this behavior. Yusun sat down in front of him with his arms folded. The policeman asked him to sit up straight, because this was a police station after all. Yusun wanted to know what had happened. The policeman looked at him angrily. Luke asked if he was going to tell him. The policeman said that these foreigners had abused the children and they were now in the intensive care unit. The evidence is clear, so punishment is inevitable. The man knew that they were here illegally, and there was a high probability of a worse punishment. Yusun asked if it would be a complete mess at this rate. The policeman replied that in this situation it was indisputable. Yusun thought about it. The policeman looked at him nervously. The man tapped his finger. He could hardly stop himself from laughing. Jason thought that this was a good deal and he could get rid of these scum legally. Suddenly he heard Io's voice. It was good that she couldn't read minds anymore, but her telepathy was much better. Yusun asked her to stop talking to him and let him decide everything himself. Io said in disappointment that she believed him. Yusun realized that she was crying. One of the men approached Yusun and asked if he was the guardian of these foreigners. Luke turned around angrily and asked why he was asking. The man was asking Jason if he was the guardian of the foreigners. He was outraged by the answer. He did not understand what kind of shameless people these were. The man asked if Yusun had heard from the detective what they had done to their children. Luke replied that he had, and that they deserved it. The parents of the beaten children were shocked by this answer. Yusun said that it was their children who started it. Their children who attacked in a pack without thinking about the consequences. Because parents raised them like stupid gods, such consequences happen. The man was angry. He told Yusun that even if he apologized, no one would accept it. He didn't understand why Yusun was disobeying adults and said that he had a bad upbringing. Luke replied that his parents had raised him well and that he hadn't grown up as fucked up as his children. His parents are not scum like him. The man took an angry swing at Jason. Suddenly he tripped over a chair and fell. The policeman asked the guardian to calm down a bit and began to help the man up. Yusun said that he did not even move his hands. And this man, like his child, attacked first. He did not understand how a police officer could criticize him alone now. Yusun said that he was calm, but he was angry that his guardians were being treated like criminals. He suggested looking at the facts. Yusun turned to his parents and began to say that children follow their parents' example. And now the man attacked him first. Luke asked why he should be calm about it. The man angrily slammed his palm on the table, because everyone continued to consider his guardians criminals. He asked the investigator if those bastards were really innocent. The policeman looked down in embarrassment. The woman, who was looking at Alicia angrily, objected and began to argue that children had suffered. Exactly, children. Yusun was angry. Everyone thought children were innocent, and it was a crime when adults beat children. Yusun said that in 2 years they would be adults. The woman looked at him indignantly. Luke said that the problem was that they were teenagers now and asked if they were adults. Would they be punished properly? The parents were outraged by these words. Yusun said he would drag this case out for 2 years and see what would happen to their children. The man who had fallen down said indignantly that these were threats. Yusun replied that he was just proving his point. He was having fun with it. He asked if he should file a counterclaim, and now he wasn't joking. Yusun was confident that he would continue the court case for 10 years, from the time their children entered college until they dropped out. He asked if the parents were confident. Everyone was outraged. Yusun clapped and asked only those who were willing to fight dirty to stay. He had a smile on his face. Jason was serious. At Luke's house, Sylvia was scolding Leon, and he was apologizing. The woman was angry because she had told him not to interfere in the affairs of others. Less than half a day had passed, and they had already done something. Then Sylvia looked at Valian and said that it was his fault too. He had to stop Leon. The barbarian apologized. He had nothing to say. He only said that he had let his guard down because of that cute girl. Alicia angrily asked who he was talking about. Myrnie interrupted the conversation. She said that everyone thought she was the one who was going to cause big trouble. Myrnie heard that Luke had cut their expenses by 50% and now she could not dream of delivering food. Alicia got angry and said that if she kept talking, she would get what she deserved. She also called her a stinking animal bitch. Myrnie just smiled and said she was very scared. Suddenly, someone's hand hit the floor. The women looked at the huge crack in surprise. Yusun smiled and said that they could continue, but if anything broke, They would have to work to repair it. The women exhaled indignantly. Yusun said again that they could continue. Myrnie and Alicia shook hands with fake smiles, as a sign of reconciliation. Suddenly, Valian approached Jason. He looked at the man angrily. Yusun was surprised to see what he was looking at. Valian continued to look at him, but then he looked away. Several days passed. A voice came from Yusun's room saying that you don't have to be nice to people like that. The man nervously tapped his finger on the table. He said that he didn't know about the hospital bills, but they had even billed the amount of the approval. He thought it was greedy. His interlocutor said that if he had time, he would have solved everything properly, but the outcome of their application for refugee status was at stake. He could not call them guardians forever. Yusun called out angrily to Myrnie and Alicia. Myrnie smiled. The elf said that Luke hadn't allowed them to give up yet, but Yusun said it was okay to lower them. The women looked at him in confusion. Jason said that he needed them for one thing. Jason asked the women for help. If they did a good job, Myrnie would get everything she wanted, clothes and jewelry, and Alicia would get her allowance back. The women looked at each other. They were surprised to hear Luke ask for their help. The man thought he was going to go crazy at this rate. He asked the women not to look at him as if he was dying. Yusun scratched his head and said he just wanted to use them for what he needed. He took Alicia's ear with one hand. With the other hand, he took Myrna's ear. Yusun shouted angrily that they should be responsible for their actions, because he was tired of cleaning up all the dirt after them. The women were crying, and yet the warriors were relieved to hear Jason scolding. Myrnie and Alicia, the two women, complete opposites in their personal tastes, had a relationship that went beyond animosity. They could boast of superior abilities on the part of the commonality of their capabilities. Alicia, who has the ability to block even the most advanced invisible devices. Myrnie, who had innate acting, manual dexterity, and a host of other abilities. If you combine their abilities and talents, you can have a spy reconnaissance with a crazy combination. Alicia was holding a tablet, and now, she said that at first they secretly researched the bastards who were hunting them. Myrnie said they found their weakness. This spy intelligence reappeared in the 21st century. Yusun asked if it really took them no more than half a day. Aram said that he had done a good job. It was faster with artificial intelligence. Yusun looked at the spreadsheet. He thought so. The man who had attacked him was a corrupt official, and he had even given money to the school principal. The woman who looked at Alicia angrily was a tax evader. Yusun smiled. The problem, as he thought, was with his parents. 3 days after that, the parents, who did not want to make concessions, came on their own, and the incident definitely ended peacefully. Valian and Leon stood in front of Yusun with their aprons on. The man asked what they had learned from the incident. Yusun sat in his chair and asked why they did not understand anything from such a precious experience. He thought that the men had turned into perverts because they wanted to fight more. Leon denied this. The man was nervous. He remembered the crying guy with glasses. Leon said he realized that he had acted stupidly, but he was angry that in the modern developed world everything is much worse than in Midgard. His grandfather used to say that laws are made by people, but people should never be above the law. Leon added that there are many people in this country who violate this rule. In his opinion, democracy is a good system, but it seemed that the problems were only accumulating. Yusun looked at Valian in silence. The barbarian said that the thing he realized was what was the criterion of power. In this world, money and rule were considered power. He did not know that such things are absolute. Only in this world are they a way of struggle. Valian realized this. Suddenly the barbarian clenched his fists. He was not going to follow such methods. Alicia also mentioned the boy with glasses. She said that people, after all, are people. At best, they help, but do not know mercy and grace. And yet, the elf looked at the flower in surprise. A small smiling boy handed it to Alicia. The woman took the flower. The boy smilingly smeared it on her goodbye. The elf thought that modern people were more disgusting than in Midgard. She hated them. Jusen got up from his chair. He noticed that the last one was not very good. Still, he decided to end it there. The man asked them not to forget about the feelings they had experienced. After all, the world to which they would have to adapt is such a place. The group listened to him attentively. Suddenly, something caught Jason's attention. Sylvia said she was interested in something. The man sat back in his chair, said that there were many interesting things in this world, and asked what she wanted. Sylvia said nothing in particular. After all, Leon had disobeyed his instructions, and she wondered why Yusun had left without saying anything. The man asked what else he was supposed to say. Suddenly, Yusun looked at something. He exhaled angrily. The man replied that, just as those bastards had said earlier, there was indeed a lot of irrationality in this world. Sylvia did not understand. The The boy with the glasses was sitting on his bed. Upset, Yusun said that when a victim lives struggling with their injuries, it is irrational that the perpetrator lives happily. The man slammed his fist on the table. He thought it was disgusting. Husan said that if you make others unhappy, it is true that you have to pay for your sins. The same was true for those policemen. Sylvia understood what that meant. Leon swept the road. Yusun thought he was a fucking bastard. But someone appeared behind Leon. The man turned around and the boy with the glasses was very scared. He ran away as fast as he could. This time, Leon saw a note. He picked it up and began to read. The man was surprised. The boy with the glasses thanked him for saving him and apologized for being scared and running away. Yusun believed that Leon had done the right thing when he intervened. Even though he didn't want to admit it, Leon stood with the note in his hands and looked at the sunset. The blue sky was hovering over the Yusun house. Leon, Sylvia, and Lucy were sitting at the table over their textbooks. Yusun watched them. Leon suddenly began to learn Hangul. Sylvia was studying the middle school curriculum. Lucy was already at the university application stage. They said that she had really great knowledge, and someone had a hard head and barely passed the qualifying exam. Yusun thought this world was unfair. Suddenly, a happy Mirin looked out from behind the wall and told Luke that she had a request. The man was surprised. The woman happily asked him to invest a little in her. Yusun asked if she had collateral. Myrnie was surprised. She thought about it for a while. Suddenly the woman smiled. Mirin arched her back, made a cat pose, and offered her body. Yusun grimaced in disgust. The woman asked him what was wrong with his expression and why it hurt him so much. She asked him not to look like that. 3 days later, Myrnie left the house. Aya was crying. She told Yusun that he had to find her, because this child would not survive in this world alone. The goddess begged him to find Myrnie, despite the fact that they had a bad relationship in the past. Yusun was not going to look for her, because the woman had left home on her own. Someone approached the joyful Myrnia. A bunch of people offered her to appear on stage and handed her business cards. The woman happily said that she would go on stage as many times as she wanted, if only she was given a chance. Myrnie caught the indignant glances of the women. She smiled. Myrnie happily told them that the world was unfair. She was being filmed live. Yusun sat at his computer and said that the woman was very skillful. Aram said that Myrnie was too skilled, so he was worried. There could be an accident because of jealousy. Yusun replied that even if that happened, Myrnie would not get hurt. On the contrary, those who would be jealous would be hurt. Aram said that this was a problem. The man asked him to forget about it. Yusun said that there was one less warrior in the group and they had to accept it. Aram realized why Yusun was in a good mood. This was exactly what he was trying to achieve. The man was smiling with satisfaction. Yusun took a cup of tea and asked when Myrna would make her debut. Aram answered that the academy Myrnie attends has agreements with several agencies. They hold events every year to showcase talented and attractive candidates. Yusun sipped his tea. It was like organizing a matchmaking event. He asked if Mirin had such an opportunity. Aram said yes. He had heard that being chosen as a candidate was as difficult as pulling a star out of the sky. But as soon as Mirin joined them, she immediately took the place. Yusun thought that life was unfair. Aram thought about it. He said that there were rumors that there were illegal sponsors among the agencies that negotiated, and many interns had gone missing. Yusun put his cup on the table. His face was sad. Aram turned to him. The man sat silently. After a moment, he turned around in embarrassment. Aya was crying and asked what Aram was talking about. The man embarrassedly took the doll by the collar. The goddess, waving her legs in different directions, said that illegal sponsorship should not be allowed. Myrnie sat in the cold, wrapped in a light cloak. In Midgard, it didn't matter how talented or capable you were. Many people died of cold and hunger. Myrnie was one of those people until she met an old thief, in a world that was hard to live in because of the difference in social status. So, Mirin thought that now the living conditions are much better than in Midgard. Some people say it's hell here, but it can't be compared to Midgard. She wasn't a genius, like Lucy. She wasn't the kind of person who did her best like Leon and Sylvia. She wasn't as short-sighted as Valian, and not as smart as Alicia. But unlike them, Mirin was skilled at acting and trickery. And then, Mirin came across a personal broadcast of an influential person. The corridor was quiet. Smiling Myrnie was walking calmly. She was carrying a bowl of salad. Suddenly something caught her attention. The women were whispering, looking at Myrnie. Her hand trembled. She smiled and thought that envy is the same in all worlds. Valian watched the woman. He thought that Mirin still had a bad temper. The barbarian came with her only because the goddess said so. The leaders angrily ordered her to come to her senses. They said that women should think about the money that was invested in them. They threatened to kill them if any of them fell. People were scurrying around the corridor. Valian thought it was very peaceful and calm. Suddenly, someone interrupted his thoughts. A man opened the door and said that the shooting of model in the big city was about to begin. He asked everyone to get ready. Valian looked at the camera with interest. There was a woman sitting in a chair being painted. She was having her hair done and Valian thought that she looked like a modern aristocrat. Suddenly, someone came into the room smiling. Valian's eyes instantly became frightened. He looked angrily at the back of the smiling stranger. The woman clapped her hands. Attracting attention, she announced that model in the big city was being broadcast on cable channels. This was a great opportunity, because it would be broadcast everywhere. Myrnie was smiling. She thought that since this academy had several contracts, she could make her debut in a small program. She looked thoughtfully at the crowd. She hoped that her goal was close. The managers said that everyone had done a good job. Tired, Mirren sat in her chair. It didn't seem right to her that she was losing such freedom. Suddenly someone spoke to her. A smiling man with glasses said that he was very pleased to meet her. He handed her a business card. The man explained that he was a representative of DM. Oh myant. The woman took the piece of paper and said she didn't have a business card yet. Oh myant said that was okay, and if she didn't mind, he would like to invite them for a cup of coffee somewhere quiet. Myrnie said that the man seemed very energetic. Oh myant apologized for making her uncomfortable. He just really wanted to talk to her. The smile never left his face. Myrnie did not understand why this man was so unpleasant. She realized that a strong stench was coming from somewhere. It was as if a fly born from rotten feces was right in front of her eyes. Myrnie covered her face with her hands. Valian stood in front of her and told her that the conversation was over for the day. He embarrassedly said that this girl was his younger sister and she seemed very tired, so she would contact him later. Mirren was outraged. O'Myant saw the difference in their appearance. Valian replied in embarrassment that they were half-siblings. The man said that in that case he would meet Mirren another time. The woman indignantly asked who was the brother. The barbarian replied that Miena should first thank him. Moreover, he asked if she felt it. The woman did not understand. O'Myant was happily talking to someone on the phone. Valian said that the man smelled like magic. The lights were on in Juson's house. The man was sitting at the computer and smilingly asking someone why they were here. Valian said that it was hard for him to believe it too. But how could he not believe it when he could feel it so clearly? Juson said that his senses were in trouble and asked if the barbarian wanted to see a doctor. Valian put his hand to his heart and said that he swore by the name of the steppe. He was not sick. The barbarian knew that Luke did not believe him, but he begged him to believe him this time. The great warrior of the steppe said that these were not empty words and he was sure of it. Myrnie embarrassedly said that she still remembered their smell, and the scent she smelled today belonged to them. It was true. Yusen sat silently in his chair. Suddenly the door opened and Luke stepped out into the hallway. Io sat on the floor in surprise. The man angrily took her by the collar and ordered her to tell everything she knew right now. The goddess was scared and said she knew nothing. Yusen shouted that he would remind her of everything. The warriors did not understand what he was doing to the goddess. Io begged for mercy. Io sat tied up and cried. Next to her was a bound Sylvia, who was also crying and did not understand what the goddess had done wrong. Io asked her not to worry so much about her. Juson sat in front of her and calmly told her everything she knew. Io said that she really didn't know anything and she had no reason to lie to him. The man stood up and said that in that case there was nothing to be done. Io was happy to think that he would solve them, but Yusen was not going to do that. The man took a bowl of water and said that there was a way to make him remember what he needed. He lifted the surprised Io by the rope. The man took the goddess to the water and said that water torture was very painful. Frightened, Io begged him not to do it. Her tears streaming down, the goddess was about to touch the water. Suddenly she shouted that there was a crack. Yusen angrily held her up to his face and noticed that the goddess had said she didn't know anything. Io asked if he was satisfied now. The rope fell to the floor. The goddess cried and said that it was too much, because it was scary. Yusen asked how a body that doesn't even breathe could be scared. She had no feelings to be upset in this case. Io looked at her husband and said that it was incredible. There are such strange ways to bring back memories. So Yusen asked what kind of crack she was talking about. The goddess replied that the gap is also called a spatial rift. Apparently, the man also knew about it well. Luke said that there are many dimensions in this world, and the fact that he appeared in the Midgard was purely accidental. The man asked if the demon had come to their world by chance. Io asked if there were many creatures in this world connected to Midgard. Luke asked if any of the warriors had contributed to this, but the girl said that was not the case. Io said that there was already an entity connected to Midgard in this world before they came. Jusun was shocked. The goddess said that it was not the hero's fault. The hero said that he was the starting point, and they would have to clean up after themselves. The damn cockroaches had reached Luke's hometown. This did not console the man. He said he needed to investigate. Valian suggested that they join him. Luke turned around in surprise. Valian continued that he knew the man hated them. However, the warriors themselves are just as much enemies to the demons. Valian Rex said that he would do whatever Luke ordered. Myrni also took the initiative. She said that she was not as strong as Valian, but she would do her job perfectly. Luke thought about it, but hesitated. He didn't know whether he should trust working with them. Suddenly, Io tugged at his pants leg. She told him to trust the soldiers. Even though they had shown him many bad sides, they were still veterans who had fought 100 battles. Yusun Luke thought about it. After a while, the room. Sylvia was still lying tied up on the floor. She was looking for Luke. At that time, in another part of the city, in the night office, Miente was watching Myrni's progress. She was really trying hard. The school says that the girl is not very tall, but she had a slender body and naturally white skin. He wondered how the girl would moan in bed. His eyes were full of greed. He intended to call the girl. The man picked up the phone and dialed Myrna's number. The man was going crazy with anticipation. Myrni was talking to someone on the phone with a smile on her face. She said she understood and politely said goodbye, but the heroes were one step ahead. The girl knew what she was doing. She reported that she had successfully completed everything. Valian asked if it was really that simple. Myrni said that all animals are the same when they are in mating season, so the girl was just taking advantage of her beauty. The man looked at the girl in surprise. Myrni was embarrassed by this look. Suddenly, Luke entered the room. He said that going to a demon without clothes was like going to a picnic in the spring without preparation. Throwing the watch on the table, Yusun said that DM Studio is a place full of sexual favors, threats, and forced consensual sex. If there are any unforeseen circumstances, you have to leave the place immediately, but if the characters lose their vigilance, they will die. Myrni was not afraid at all. She likes such games. The heroes came to the company. Men said that their company was a little different from other agencies, so if you sign a contract, you can get great benefits. Mirin thought that if they didn't know the whole truth, they might have believed the man. Valian noticed the skill of people in this world to throw words around and put noodles in your ears. A woman met the heroes in the corridor. Myongti did not expect to see her. It was Yun Jong. She came to greet the newcomers, but Myongti said they only came to see the agency. The girl started to approach to greet the heroes. She introduced herself and extended her hand, but Myrni read everything the first time. The representative of Myongti was a lustful pig, and this woman was supposed to be his mistress. Myrni knew she had to get into character. It might not have been convincing, but she tried to gain trust by being sycophantic. She recounted her admiration for the woman. Myrni said she had seen all the movies with the actress. Suddenly, footsteps were heard in the corridor. The soldiers tensed up. It was one of the staff members, a secretary. He turned to Mr. Miente and said that the director was waiting for the man, but the representative said he was currently receiving guests, so he would come back later. The secretary indignantly said that he would tell him so. Mr. Myonti asked to wait for the man and come to him. Mirini noticed the employee. She smelled a strange odor. It was a bad smell that reminded her of a girl. It was a descendant of the Fly King, from the Maggot Army. She asked Valian if there were any survivors of that army. The man said he didn't remember, but he remembered that they used forbidden magic. The girl confirmed it. She had clearly seen it with her own eyes. Marini concluded that the fly larvae might be alive, so it was worth checking this secretary. Valian assured her not to act too hastily. The man assured him that it was impossible, because he had seen the death of the king and the entire army of larvae. However, if this secretary was even of the second level, the heroes had no chance of winning. Mianai realized that it would be best to warn Luke. She tried to call Aram, but Aram didn't answer. She realized it was a trap. Miente apologized and said that he had kept them waiting for a long time. The girl said directly that she noticed that the phones in this room were not working. So what was the problem? But the representative had no problem answering that this happens here. You just have to wait a little bit. The man accidentally licked his lip very appetizingly. He asked what the characters thought about the contract. The girl thought that the man hadn't even shown her the terms of the contract, so she said she was still thinking about it. She said it was hard for her to make a decision so quickly, so she suggested that we end the tour for today. The soldiers quickly walked to the nearest elevator. In her haste, Marini tried to open the doors by pressing the button. but the button did not work. This caused the girl to panic. Valiant asked her to step back. A moment later, he struck the door with a powerful blow. But it was useless. Not a single scratch was made. Ment and the secretary were already catching up. The secretary apologized and said that they had probably rushed the contract and were not being professional. The man suggested going straight to the director. The director said he wanted to see her. The girl smiled and said, "Isn't the director their king of flies?" The secretary was surprised that the girl knew such details. He suspected that Myrnie knew something. She said that she didn't care anymore, so the secretary could stop pretending to be human. The man was in a stupor. He had no choice. Suddenly, people started coming out of the rooms, behaving like zombies. They gradually surrounded the heroes. The secretary said that the girl had acted rashly. Myrnie noticed Roy's characteristic reaction. She thought that their real leader was at least one level above the secretary. She consulted with Valiant and asked if there was a chance of breaking through. The man replied that he could handle that many, and they could get out of the building with the help of the crack. So the hunt for demons began. Rex began to concentrate. The heroes took a fighting position. The man said that now they would enjoy the battle. Myrnie just smiled.